So I have been talking about when we do our Tai Chi to not go to our limit and to change direction before you go to your limit. And of course, I've been talking about that in a physical way, so that when we're doing our rotation, the tendency for a lot of us, myself included, is to rotate till the point where I can feel it. And when I can feel it, then I know I've reached my limit and I need to turn around and change direction. And I think that's a natural, maybe a human thing to do, because we're in this body, so we want to feel that physicalness. And in order to know where to turn, it's like we need a curb to know where we stop when we park, kind of thing. But what if we actually practice changing directions before our limit, then it becomes a much more flowing experience, and it's really creating a better environment for our body, for healing. So for example, if we're doing push water and we rotate all the way to the end, and if you're doing it correctly, then everything in your body is rotating, everything is spiraling. And it's spiraling from the inside out, from the bones. The bones are spiraling from your pinky toe all the way up across to even your ribs have a slight spiral, your spinal, your vertebrae, and your arms. And it's all happening in this beautiful synchrony. It's much like the galaxy. The galaxy is spiraling, and every little bit of it is spiraling together in this great concert of synchrony. And so when we're doing push hands, or I'm sorry, not push hands, but push water or halitaxi or any of those forms, if we can let go of trying to find our limit, or if we're aware of where our limit is and we stop and change directions before we get to that limit, then it's more congruent with, I believe, with the energy around us, the creation, and what God intended for us. And it feels better. I mean, just from a standpoint of Tai Chi, it feels better. And for those of you that experienced it, and we'll do it in this session, boy, didn't the Chi really ramp up? Oh my gosh, I mean, it was stunning how much more Chi by actually dialing back and not doing quite as much. And more importantly, going to the stopping short of the end range and changing direction right before you get to that end range, so that you're not constantly operating within your limit. Within your limits, you're working inside of those limits. And what struck me while I was teaching the class, and it was that that whole thing is kind of a metaphor, because the limit is something we can feel, so it's tangible. And that's the metaphor for operating within this tangible 3D world. Whereas when we stop beforehand, it's kind of nebulous. It's a little ambiguous. Well, maybe our limit's here, and you want me to stop before I even feel that and change direction, then I'm kind of swimming around in this nebulous zone, this ambiguous zone. But that's where we're more free. That's more like operating within the space in between the particles of the atom. That's when we can start to open ourselves up to God's will and to our own, or rather to the potentials that are out there. Because if we're going to our limit, then we're, in effect, we're creating our own, that was it, we're creating our own boundaries in which to work. But if we don't go to our limit, then we're not really clear on where those boundaries are, and I think those boundaries expand. So the very act of letting go of having to find your limit, you're actually opening yourself up to be limitless. That's what came to me in this flash, because in part, I had so much more Chi flowing through me because I wasn't relying on my own tangible limitation to feel justified in my movements. I was able to dial back, and maybe it's a matter of trusting a little bit and not requiring that, what we call in therapy is, it's called a hard end feel. So when we're ranging somebody in therapy, you learn to assess the end feel of their range, and that tells you something. An end feel that's inflammation feels kind of spongy. An end feel that's empty means that that there may be a tear or something going on. An end feel that's a hard end feel without pain simply means you've reached the end of the range of motion of that particular joint for that particular individual. And each joint has a different end feel. So the shoulder, for example, has more of a rubbery end feel. So you learn these skills, or well, good therapists learn these skills, to know what it is. So I think when we do Tai Chi and when we do life, we tend to look for that hard end feel before we make a change. Just like Maestro falling out of that bed. He has to fall out of the bed before he changes over to the safe bed. So he has to have that hard end feel, crash in the middle of the night to say, okay, I'll move to the bed, rather than just being proactive and moving to the safe bed and operating within a comfort zone, without having to go to the hard end feel. And I began to think about the journey that I'm taking right now, and also relationships, which made me think of relationships. I don't think we're designed, we shouldn't be in a relationship that takes us to our limitations, that requires us to be so uncomfortable that at that point we have to make a change. We should be aware enough to say this isn't a good fit, or I love the way Dr. Joe says, we're no longer a vibrational match. Isn't that a great thing, a great way to look at it? Because it releases all the angst behind it. We're just not at the same vibrational match anymore, and that happens. But to make the change before it becomes a crisis, before it has wrung you out and is exhausting you and draining you of your own energy. To recognize that it is not allowing you to operate within a framework that is an expression of yourself. Whether this is a relationship or an issue that you're working with, or a relationship with yourself even. Because I think we tend to be hard on ourselves. And in that process, we are taking ourselves to our own limitation. And when we do that, we're not operating in that soft zone, in the soft end feel, where it just never really ends. We're not quite sure where it is, but we can easily change direction before we hit that hard end feel. And when we change directions, then maybe we can take a kinder approach to ourselves. So identifying maybe what that hard end feel feels like in your relationship with yourself, or your relationship with someone else, or your relationship with a problem, and recognizing that that's a boundary you don't even need to go to. And by not going to that utter extreme, or the end of your resources, the end of your energies, and changing direction before you get there, that you're creating a whole different possibility, a whole different potentiality for yourself. And I think that's one of the things that meditation helps us do, is that we get into a place where we're not feeling any hard end feel. We're not feeling the limitation of our rotation, or the limitation of our relationship. We're placing ourselves in a place of that soft, nebulous feeling dissipating ourselves into something that's open, and then new energies can come flowing into us. Just like we physically felt when we were doing push water and we changed direction each time before we got to our end range. All of a sudden it was like we were floating, and like the energy was just filling us. And what if we could operate through life like that? And so that's what I want you to think about. How many times, and as you know, what I'm telling you, I'm telling myself as well, but how many times are we taking ourselves, for whatever reason, whether it's self-inflicted or we imagine it's from the environment, how many times are we taking ourselves to the end range before we kind of change direction, go the other way to another end range, and back and forth and back and forth, and not allowing ourselves the permission to flow a different direction before we hit that proverbial wall. Even in the smallest of ways. You know, most people think that in order to make a change, we have to make a change, a big sweeping change. And in truth, we really oftentimes only need to make one small change, and then that becomes a chain reaction that creates other changes. But we have to be a little bit mindful of that. We have to think about what that small change could be. So I'm going to give you a very tangible example. So when I was in college, I was in the Florida State marching band the first year. And I had classes all day, and then right after classes from like 9 to 4, then we would have marching band practice. So I'd have to go straight from my class to marching band practice. And I was famished. I mean, I was so hungry by that point. And they would always bring out just huge sheets of day-old donuts that were donated by some donut store, right? So I'm slamming down 3 donuts, 4 donuts, whatever. I don't even want to think about it. It's so gross. Right before doing marching band, which was strenuous activity in humid Florida in the evening or afternoon, but I put on 20 pounds. And so all of a sudden I was heavy. And I thought, well, what the heck, you know? And so then I'm thinking, gosh, I need to change this and do this and sign up for this athletic class and this and this. No, all I need to do was just stop eating those dumb donuts. I just needed to change one thing, and that one thing was to prepare and have a snack before I went to practice. You know, and of course I was young back then, so eventually, you know, the weight came off with one little small change. It wasn't I had to change my whole life. It wasn't that I had to change a whole bunch of things, and it wasn't even that I needed to be hard on myself about it. I just had to be aware and make it a small change. Don't eat the day-old donuts. And then the weight came off. So we don't need to necessarily make big sweeping changes. We can make a small change sometimes that stops us from going to that end range. Because when we go to the end range, just like when we go to the end range in Tai Chi, we are not being kind to our body. We're not being kind to ourselves. We're not being aware. We're just plowing through, and we're actually looking for that end range so that we know where our limitations are. It's kind of like that tiger in that 12 by 12 foot cage. You know, he knew where his walls were. When those walls were finally removed, he couldn't move out of them. He still stayed within a 12 by 12 foot area. And so I almost wonder if we get so accustomed to the hard infields in our life that we're not even recognizing them. And sometimes it takes an epiphany or a revelation or a new set of lenses. I mean, I know I've had that myself in the last few months, and realizing how much of it is just become so much a part of me that I'm not really that much aware. Yesterday I wrote that I see a field, a beautiful field with sun shining and the grass is flowing and it's just beautiful. And there's God on the other side of that field, and He's inviting me to come over, and He wants to hold my hand. But between me and the field are a whole bunch of burrs that are sticking to me as I go. And those are the things that have attached themselves to me through life. And some of them have been on me or in my shoe, that I walk different, and I've gotten so accustomed to that pain and discomfort that I don't even recognize that that's not normal. And how many of those burrs that are stuck on me am I hesitant to remove? Because maybe initially that hurts a little bit more. You know how they stick on your fingers when you try to take them off? So, ow, that hurts. That really hurts to let go, to get rid of that. But it's the best thing in the world to get rid of, because then it's gone. It might hurt at first, but now it's gone. And so now I've got more space to operate from. I'm not working within a narrow end feel. I've got a little wider end feel. You know, I can stop short of that because I'm a little more free. And the truth is, honestly, I think we can just take a big old huge leap right over all those burrs, right over to God, and just be in that field. I went to a meeting, a support group meeting yesterday for the first time. I've never been to anything like that. And, you know, God bless them for what they do. But I almost wonder that if being so structured and being so systematic in the approach, that they're creating a process that makes you feel like you have to go through a process to get rid of your end feels. The end feels is my terminology. When in fact, I just wonder, like I've said before, I wonder if just by creating those processes and making you feel like you've got to go through some angst, you've got to go through some cleansing, you've got to go through some sharing and this kind of thing, if that's not in itself creating end ranges, limitations, end feels, a structure to make us operate within. Maybe it's not that hard. Maybe it's not that complicated. Maybe that process is great for some people, and maybe it will be for me. I don't know. I'm not going to give up on it yet. But what I'm saying is, maybe it's not as big as a process as we need to make it. Maybe just by stopping before we get into our own limitations, our own end range, being aware and changing direction before we get there, no matter how small of a change in direction, will allow us to operate more in a comfort of openness and within the alignment of God's will instead of our own will. So the scripture to support this, are you surprised? I'm still on Genesis. I can't get past Genesis. I mean, I'm reading New Testament every morning, but Genesis, every time I read it, I'm like, wow, that's so beautiful. You know? So this is Genesis 2, paragraph 1. So the heavens and the earth were completed, and all of their hosts. And by the seventh day, God completed His work, which He had done, and He rested. God rested on the seventh day from all His work which He had done. So God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it He restored from all His work which He had created and done. So you see, even God didn't keep pushing through, working. He didn't work to His end range, which of course is infinitive, but even He gave us an example. Don't work till you're exhausted. Step back and say, this is good. And do that before you've reached your limitation. He didn't need to take a seventh day to rest. He did that to set an example for us, to say you don't have to live in duress and angst and effort and fatigue and stress. It's okay to step back and say to yourself, I am good. It's okay to step back and say, I need rest. And you step back before you get to the fatigue. Or, I need a break from this relationship. Or, I'm tired of cooking this week, so I'm going to go and have it delivered. You know? To give yourself permission to just make small adjustments so that you can rest. If God rested, why not us? If God stopped short of his limitations, which are limitless, then why not us to stop short of our limitations and not constantly press into our personal end range? Well, how do you do that? I'm not quite sure. How do you put this into practice? First of all, just being aware. And secondly, I think when we do our Tai Chi, which we're going to do push water and we're going to practice this stopping before your end range, I truly think that what you practice physically, especially in the realm of Tai Chi and Qigong, what you practice physically, metaphorically, it presents something in your mind that you can understand because you're physically moving through it, and it somehow starts to infiltrate into your way, into your life. I mean, I think all of you probably are aware that since you've been doing Tai Chi for a while, that your responses have changed. Your responses to external stimuli have changed somewhat. I know they have with me. I mean, I remember what kind of things would really get on my nerves or really bug me, or how I would respond to things. And while I'm still, working on things, a lot of stuff doesn't bother me like it used to. And I remember the first time it happened, and I thought, wow, why didn't that bother me? It was almost foreign to me. It was like that burr had been taken off, and I was like, wow, how can that not hurt? Why isn't that hurting anymore? And so now it just rolled more, and it just became easier, these things. Now still, I got some burrs that are, well embedded. They can still bug me if anybody presses on it, but I'm a different chemical makeup, a different mindset, a different way of working, navigating through life than I was before Tai Chi. And so I think that our movement, our metaphor of movement, can indeed become a way for you. So by practicing stopping before your limitations, you're changing a mindset right there. And I believe you're changing your chemistry as well. Our posture changes our chemistry. So if we're not constantly going to our end range and sending the information to the fascia, then we're allowing a different chemical response in our body. And then that can roll over into your awareness of how maybe you're reaching to your limit a little too much in life. And be able to change a little bit on one thing without it being, beating up yourself. So God didn't reprimand himself for taking the day off. He owned it. And not only did he own it, but he told us, this is a sanctified day, and you're to rest as well. And by eliminating our own limitation, In other words, not operating into our end feel. By stopping short of that, we're stepping into more of the unknown. That's what it is. Yes, because our end range or our end limitation is known to us. So rather than the word nebulous or ambiguous, maybe the word is unknown. Because guess what? The point in which we change direction is kind of unknown to us if we can't feel it, right? And it could be different each time. Maybe this time it's right here. Maybe this time it's right here, or right here. It's stepping into that unknown. Letting go of the need for feeling the limitation in order to identify ourselves. And then I think God can assist us more because we're getting outside of ourselves and more into the realm of Him. It's like a dog on a leash. So if the dog is pulling, that's the end range, that's the limit, he's pulling to his limitation. And so, I mean, I know God is omnipotent, but he also respects our will because that's what he said he would do. So if the dog is us and God is holding the leash and the dog is pulling and to our limitation, then God's just going to follow along. Okay, you want to go that way? All right, I'll let you go that way. You get that analogy? Okay, if the dog has got a loose leash, then it's more of a working together kind of thing. Now there's possibilities. Now we could go left, we could go right, we could sniff that tree, we could go over there to that park, because we're not pulling so hard in the direction we think we need to go that we're ignoring the collaboration that could be happening for us. So operating on that loose leash, where we don't require that feedback of all the parameters that we have placed on ourselves and in our lives to make us feel our 12 by 12 foot cage, or feel the end of the leash. Or maybe just not pulling so hard and just residing in more of a range of comfort. And I think rest there is, I think when we operate within that unknown area, unknown because we're not getting the feedback that we think we need, that's a form of rest because it's ease, it's openness, it's a floating, it's not needing something to identify ourselves externally. And it's placing ourselves in the seat of the Holy Spirit, which is more of that, operating in that space that's endless and doesn't have a hard end feel. So let's do this. Why don't we do our push water and just put this into a movement, just so that we can experience that, to kind of get your juices flowing and thinking in that direction, and using this as a metaphor towards starting to identify those things in your life or those ways that you might operate that are taking you to your end feel, and just becoming aware of them and maybe figuring different ways on how you could change, make small changes to reside within, changing direction a little bit before you reach that point. Okay? So let's try it. So the first thing I want you to do is just get in your Tai Chi stance and put your hands on your quad. And then you're going to turn and rotate. And I want you to rotate to the point where you feel you've been rotating. Okay, not necessarily where the infield is, but just where you've been rotating. And then go to the other side to the point at which you've been rotating. Because that right now is kind of your set point. That's your infield, whether you know it or not. Okay, and for me, I feel the tendons in my ankles and my knees and my hips start to tighten because they're rotating around an axis to the end range. And I've gotten so accustomed to that little tiny bit of discomfort in my ankles that I've identified it as normal. And it's not normal, it's not right, it shouldn't be happening. Okay, so just be aware as you turn to your end range, tune into your body and see what you feel. Where is it tight? Where do you potentially feel some strain? Okay. Now, once you've done that, I want you to stop at least 20% short of where you think that end range was. And it's going to be hard to do because you've been doing this for so long, or I've been doing this for so long. It's hard to make yourself stop before that feedback loop. So go ahead and just turn and understate it. And this could apply to the depth of your Tai Chi stance too. You might need to stand up a little higher. Really tune into the body, feel what's happening, and stop short of any recognizable discomfort. Yeah, nice. Now let's just get our arms going with it. And now even our arms, we're so used to trying to expand way out here, just bring it in a little bit, make it a little smaller, a little understated, and just do the movement within a smaller range, so that when you circle and turn the other direction, one flows right into the other. So it's not left, right, right. It's kind of left, right. One just melts right into the other. That's it. That's right. Slow it down just a little bit, Randy, so you can feel it a little more. That's it. Nice. And now I want you to feel as though you're moving through this magnetic field all around you, so you can actually feel a gentle resistance, but you can change direction within that resistance without having to add your own resistance. And now we'll add one emotional component to this. I want you to think to yourself, I love and accept myself fully. You're scooping in that love, bringing it into your heart, accepting yourself fully. And now when you're ready, take up that bundle of energy and place it gently in your dantian. Nice. So we'll do a short prayer and then we'll open up for discussion. Lord, help us to let go of the need to find our own limitations. And by letting go of our own limitations, we're opening ourselves up to our true potential. We're allowing ourselves to be led on that loose leash as a common bond with you, rather than trying to pull in our own direction simply so that we can have our own feedback system to make ourselves feel as though we have an identity. Allow ourselves to be gentle to ourselves, to be guided by you, so that we can gently change direction when we need to, without the need of feeling our limit. Help us to recognize that by letting go of our own self-inflicted limits, that we're actually stepping into limitlessness with you. We love you, we love ourselves, and we thank you for all the blessings that you've given us. Amen.